Welcome to This Week in Money. I'm Jim Goddard. Today, Ross Clark from CIBC Wood Gundy tells us Asian equity markets are red hot. Trends Journal publisher Gerald Celente feels alternative energy sources have been underestimated and comments on money fleeing China. We'll talk to Ross Clark right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600. Welcome to This Week in Money, the source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Clark, investment advisor at CIBC Wood Gundy in Vancouver. Welcome back to This Week in Money.
I always look forward to it, Jim.
Following up on the employment numbers from last week, what do we have now?
Well, I tell you, the numbers were pretty bad. We talked about those last week, and the market on Sunday night through Monday, which was very light trading, most of the world was down pretty bad. But by the time we closed the first full day of trading on Tuesday, markets had really shaken off the bad economic numbers. We had seen a bad break on the dollar, on the U.S. dollar on the downside, and it spent most of the week recovering back all of that loss and much more. We saw highs in the precious metals on the Sunday, Monday night trading. They had about 3 days of correction down. Managed, though, to hold in at the end of the week, closing back at reasonable levels. And looking at the gold market, we had talked about the mid-March lows, sort of the Ides of March, which typically is a reversal point. In this case, we reversed off the low, had a good rally into Monday, Tuesday of this week, and becoming an early April high is something we need to watch pretty carefully here. The years in which we've rallied like this into early April, we've needed to come around and have a secondary push through there as we get into the second half of April, first week of May, to really gain some momentum. I think you'll need to see a close through the 1220 range on gold to be the catalyst. And if that comes into play, I think you could be looking at numbers closer to 1,300. But, the key right now is seeing what the market has in the way of power beneath it. We just mentioned how the market is in the U.S. dollar managed to shake off bad numbers, and the other side of the coin was the Canadian dollar up against resistance and failing, the euro up against resistance. We like to look at moving averages for key support and resistance levels, and they're pretty much the absolute minimum type of correction we could have seen occurred into that point. And if these things gather some momentum here, could be there could be a whole new leg in terms of the price action. That would be similar to what we've seen in the BRIC nations with the equity markets there. This year we had just a big breakout in the Shanghai market back in October, November, a really good run, and about a 3 or 4 week pause, and then this huge move that we've seen in this last 2 weeks, up maybe 30 to 38% in the various BRIC nations since the middle of February.
The demand for stocks has created an unusual problem in China.
Yes, they are opening stock accounts at just a phenomenal rate right now, and one of the biggest problems you're now getting is that they just don't have enough investment advisors and brokers to handle the opening of these accounts. Valuations are starting to go through the roof here. I saw some numbers that the average earnings now, if you take a look, the reported profits are versus the valuations are about 220 times. So PE ratio there pretty much taking out the best levels that were seen back in the dot-com days in North America back in 2000. But with these runaway kind of markets that have got that type of momentum, you just don't want to stand in front of them. You let them go as far as they can. You don't know if it's going to last days, weeks, or months.
I've been told keep an eye on Asia because usually they're the canary in the coal mine. When they decide to take a big drop, North America follows.
Yeah, well, and at this point, you're not seeing any weakness. I think you're going to watch carefully to see if there's a once they lose their momentum here and start to have a first sell-off and then a rally back to a lower high. That loss of momentum at that point would be the clear indication that you'd be looking for some tighter stops on basically all positions, whether they be U.S. or Canadian markets. Pull up your stops really tight.
What's happening with crude oil right now?
Crude had a reasonably quiet week. We're stuck around the $50 to $52 level, and the good support's probably still going to be down below $40. And on the upper end, I'm looking at the 100-day moving average sitting around 56.5 as a pretty important resistance level. But the stocks are doing what they should be doing. The stocks are outperforming oil, which is classic after you've had the retest of the low such we've had in March. And the oil stocks, when you take a look at the XOI index historically versus the S&P, in these months following the low, it tends to outperform, and that's exactly what we're seeing right now. I think looked at the numbers on Friday, and the XOI is about 5% better participation on the upside than we've seen in the S&P. So this is true to form right now.
Ross, thanks a lot for chatting with us.
You're very welcome.
My guest has been Ross Clark, investment advisor at CIBC Wood Gundy. If you have any questions for Ross, his email is ross.clark@cibc.ca. After the break, Trends Journal publisher Gerald Celente on This Week in Money.
Always consult your investment professional before making any investment decision. This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
My guest is Gerald Celente, publisher of the Trends Journal, his website, trendsjournal.com. Welcome to the show, Gerald.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Jim.
First, let's talk about Occupy Peace. What is it and how does it work?
Well, I'm over here in colonial Kingston, New York, and we're about 2 hours north of New York City. Kingston was the first capital of New York State. And the Constitution that was written here, as it was a state, 90% of America's Constitution was taken from this Constitution. And we're on the most historic corner in the United States, the only place on each corner where there's a pre-Revolutionary War stone building, and we have 3 of them. And what we're doing is honoring thy founding fathers. So beginning with Washington in his farewell address, no foreign entanglements. And the world was at war back then. And Franklin and Jefferson and Madison and Adams, all of the founding fathers were wise enough to know that you should not get involved in other countries' internal affairs. Do business with them, but stay out of their internal business. And that's changed. So what Occupy Peace is about bringing home all the troops, as I said, and honoring thy founding fathers. No foreign entanglements, and to rebuild America. And we're wasting our money on military that could go into rebuilding the country.
Well, so far billions have been spent, it seems, trying to influence foreign affairs by the U.S. How successful has that been?
Well, trillions. I mean, look at the wonderful victory in Afghanistan, the longest war in American history that just keeps going on. And President Obama reneged on his promise to reduce the troop force by half, and he just quietly announced that, well, we're not going to reduce the troop force. And then we're back in Iraq, and it was supposed to be just to save them Yazidis on the mountain back in September. And, of course, now we're bombing it daily, as we are bombing as well in Syria. And now the United States has also announced that they're supporting the Saudis in their campaign to destroy the Houthis in Yemen. And going back to Occupy Peace, by the way, we had planned it for May 2nd of this year, but we're postponing it, and we're going to hold it on September 20th to coincide with International Peace Day, which is actually the 21st, but the 20th is a Sunday. So that's when we're going to be holding it in September. But to keep answering your question, here the Saudis have invaded a foreign nation. They're slaughtering people, and the United States is supplying armaments, and now we're supplying also, quote, military intelligence, which is itself considering the failures as an oxymoron, and we're refueling the Saudi jets, and on and on and on. So America is now heavily involved in that as well, and our Deputy Secretary of State, his name is Anthony Blinken, is in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, announcing the United States' plans to support the Saudis in the invasion of a sovereign nation, once again, Yemen, as the United States has done in Iraq, Afghanistan, in Syria, on, and it's just destabilizing the entire area. And this Yemen, by the way, it's a big one. Although it's not in the news very much, it's big because the Houthis, and they've been fighting the Saudis, this has been going on for years, and they're trying to make it seem as though they're Iranian-backed, but even our former ambassador to Yemen said that they're not, as well as Philip Hammond from the UK said they're not affiliated with Iran at all. Yes, they are a Shia sect, and the Sunnis and the Shia have been going at it now for, 1,300 years? But the importance of this is that the Houthis say they are going to counterattack against the Saudi monarchy. I mention that because if all of a sudden you see oil fields blowing up in Saudi Arabia and an attack on the monarchy, this could have a very, very critical effect on an already unstable global economy. Look what's going on over there. Look what government of Canada, the United States, France, and the UK have created with their involvement, their colonial and imperialistic involvement in the Middle East. Whether it's killing over 1 million people in Iraq, as reported last week, that's how many were killed. The entire country is destroyed. 30,000 in Libya, in a country that wasn't doing anything to anybody, none of our business. It was the richest country in Africa, and now it's in shambles. And then, of course, you have Iraq, the ongoing war. It's never ending, even though more and more people are being killed. Syria, is already going in a direction that's creating a refugee situation that we haven't seen in decades, and over 200,000 dead. And of course, as I mentioned now, Yemen. The entire Middle East is going up in smoke and down in flames.
What's the cost of that to our economies?
It's dreadful. Speaking as an American, military, it's what Eisenhower warned us about. And remember, General Eisenhower, 5-star general, supreme commander of the Allied forces during World War II, and a 2-term president, his farewell address that nobody seems to want to pay any attention to. He warns that the military-industrial complex is robbing the nation of the genius of its scientists, the sweat of the laborers, and the future of the children. Here we are. America's a nation in decline by every standard, from education to health care, from the shrinking middle class to the people that are on food stamps. So in every aspect we're going downhill as the business of America becomes war, no longer business.
How come so many Republicans say the solution to everything is to bomb the hell out of it and cut back benefits to starving children and poor income people? And
because they're a bunch
as well.
of stupid psychopaths and sociopaths. And that's the end of the story. This guy Rand Paul, You listen to this backtrack clown. All of a sudden, now he's building the defense budget bigger than all his competitors. He made a statement the other day, and that they asked him on ABC News if he always had the presidency in his mind as a young man. And he said, well, no, not really, he said, but, when you ask the people that are running for president and you hear their friends, the friends say, it's funny. This is a quote. You meet people who are running for president and their friends will say, oh, in 8th grade, he said he was going to run for president. That's his statement. And that's what all these people in 8th grade, and that's all they are. These are the same clowns, jerks, suck-ups and brown-nosers, glad-handers, the overly ambitious and the insincere that you couldn't stand in high school and college that wanted to be class president and head of the student council. Here they are. That's all they are. Look what you got running your country. Look who's running the UK. Look who's running France. One chicken hawk, loudmouth little man that wants to start war under a guise that they know what should be done and they know best. While their kids never go anywhere to fight, and the only people that make money are General Smedley Butler, the most decorated man in U.S. history up until World War II, warned. He said, war is a racket. That's all it is. And Eisenhower, going back to him, said any man who wants to be president is either an egomaniac or crazy. So does that answer your question why the Republicans and the Democrats are no better? Look at Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. A piece of garbage. They invaded Libya, and now we're sending more support into Saudi Arabia, that monarchy, to overthrow another country, Yemen. And again, and this stuff, you saw every world leader go kiss the new king's ring in Saudi Arabia. If the Saudis' major export was broccoli, you'd think they'd be going over there. What a disgrace. And I'm tired of this king crap too. It's a dictatorship. What did a princess kiss a frog and the frog became the king? I mean, let's grow up with this royal crap.
Why is it we're hearing rumors that both the Canadian and U.S. governments are thinking about bringing back conscription?
Because the world is ready. The world is going to war. It's so obvious in front of everyone. Again, and you're seeing it with the expansion. There is absolutely no condemnation about what the United States is doing to Yemen. This is the poorest country in the region. They're slaughtering people all over, and they're civilians. Look what happened with Israel. There's a slaughter of the people in Gaza. Over 2,000 dead in reprisal for what? 3, and this is a fact, it was in reprisal for 3 Israelis being killed in the West Bank. Oh, the West Bank. You mean occupied territory? And the West Bank isn't Gaza. Why you knock down what? It's an estimated 80,000 houses, 2,100 people dead, mostly civilians. And you keep seeing the horror spreading. All of these airstrikes being from the UK, from Canada, from the U.S., in all of these Middle East countries. You know what this is, Jim? It's what I wrote about in Trends 2000 in 1996. I said you're waking up in the new millennium and the 10th crusade is underway. That's all this is. It's another crusade.
We're speaking to Gerald Celente, publisher of TrendsJournal.com. Gerald, what is the greatest speculative bubble on earth as discussed in your March Trends Monthly?
It's all the cheap dough that they're pumping into the system to prop up the markets. Take a look around the world. You're seeing whether it's the Shanghai Index, the Nikkei, one after another, the Hang Seng, the European markets, the American markets, all hitting new highs or going back to old ones. And why? Because of the flood of cheap money. And it's doing nothing for the economies. And again, that's not speculation. I can give you the proof. You look what's going on over there in Japan with their Abenomics. dumping an unprecedented trillions and trillions into boosting the equity markets. Again, the equity markets now are at I think they're up 60% in Japan. Look at their first quarter GDP estimate, 1.5%. How's that for no growth? And it's one place after another like that. You look what's going on in China with the Shanghai index hitting, again, new highs. How come? Because of the cheap money being thrown into the market. It's as simple as that, and the facts are there. You see it here. I'll give you a quote. This is from the People's Daily in China. Analysts attributed the booming market to liquidity as a result of monetary easing. Liquidity? How about calling it cheap money? Record low interest rates that the world has never seen before. You're seeing negative interest rates throughout Europe. You're seeing negative bond yields throughout Europe. The United States has not raised interest rates for nearly 10 years. We've had 0% interest rates for 6 years. Combined daily turnovers of the Shanghai and Shenzhen bourses has remained above 1 trillion yuan for the past 2 weeks, and it couldn't be any clearer. They're saying it right in front of everyone's eyes that all they're doing is pumping the markets up with more and more and more and more cheap money. And that's all that's going on around the world. You're looking at the growth in the stock markets, 2 reasons. They're borrowing money for nothing. They call them investors. They're gamblers. The people are buying back stocks. Companies are buying back their stock, borrowing money for nothing, juicing the market. And the other numbers are coming from mergers and acquisitions. They're borrowing money for nothing and doing multi-billion-dollar deals. You saw the one that just came out with Shell. They're talking about what? A $50 billion deal to buy out another company? They're borrowing money for nothing. Meanwhile, all the rest of us people, we have no place to put our money. It's hurting people that are retired, pensioners. You can't put your money in the bank and get any interest on it anymore. Yes, they created the largest bubble in world history.
The Grand Manipulation. It was on the cover of your Winter Trends journal. What's the Grand Manipulation, and is there any chance we could benefit from it?
Well, the manipulation is just what I was talking about, that the markets are being manipulated from every end. Because another part of that is this is not capitalism. We call it bankism. In capitalism, there's no such thing as too big to fail. In capitalism, you don't put record low interest rates out there to keep boosting the equity markets and have the central banks do the same gig all over the world. That's the grand manipulation, as well as manipulating the news to keep selling us war. Hey, look how many stories they come out with. There are 3 girls that were going to Turkey, and then they were going to go to Syria and join ISIS. So what? Big deal. Let them go. Was it going to change the world? 3 people joining something? How many millions of Western troops are slaughtering people and have been slaughtering people all over the Middle East? But they get fear and hysteria everywhere. I just did a talk. I was asked to do one at a high school in Jamaica, Queens, in New York. The Hillcrest School, very famous school, very high academic standards. I went there last week. The kids, a bunch of these young people are followers of mine, and they asked me to go down, so I did. I walk into the place near metal detectors and New York City cops sitting all around the joint. It wasn't as though high school wasn't prison to begin with for me. I hated it, going to school. Now you go to school, it really is prison. That's the grand manipulation. They're manipulating fear in everybody's mind. Fear and hysteria. Fear and hysteria about the markets, fear and hysteria about terrorism. And it's the grand manipulation. There is no freedom anymore. You see these pictures coming out recently of a cop pumping 10 bullets into a guy's back, and that's only one of a number of that keep coming out. Why? Because the fish rots from the head down. If you're waging wars around the world and killing innocent people, why not kill them at home? What difference does it make? Because human life has no value anymore under the scheme of the grand manipulation. It's only the ones on the top that benefit.
Is solar trending going to be a big player in the energy markets as solar energy becomes more competitive with traditional energy sources?
It's not only solar. We're seeing it with hydrogen, with battery development, and it's something, our editor, science editor, his name is Ben Davis, and he's one of the top ones in the country, if not the world. And what we're doing is we're putting out information in the Trends Journal at the latest breakthroughs that are coming, and it's much bigger than wind, solar, geothermal, or biofuel. We're going to see something, again, when this happens, places like the Middle East aren't going to be that important anymore when there's nothing there to exploit or export, such as oil. And it's going to be the big game changer. It's going to be, as we see it, as big as the discovery of fire and the invention of the wheel. It's going to have major implications, and ironically, it's happening at a time when there's an oversupply of fossil fuels and lowering demand, which is bringing down the price. And it's funny how these things happen in history. And if you think about it, from Julius Caesar to Grover Cleveland, the world's emperors and presidents went to their inaugurations and coronations in horse and buggy, and all of a sudden it changed overnight. And that's the kind of change we're going to start seeing. Alternative energy is going to be the dominant energy.
And what's going to be dominant in that?
Well, again, there are a number of breakthroughs, and they're all detailed in the Trends Journal. And battery development and hydrogen are among the two of them.
I just saw a headline about the development of an aluminum battery. Do you know anything about that?
I do. That's coming out of China along with Stanford University. And again, these are the kind of breakthroughs that are going to just keep. They're coming fast and furious. You can see the future. The handwriting is on the wall.
What's going to happen in China with all those high-rise buildings full of empty apartments, hundreds of thousands of them? What's going to happen? Is there going to be a real estate crash there?
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, what you're seeing with the Shanghai Index hitting new highs. And again, you read right from People's Daily, and they say, quote, to bolster the lukewarm real economy, the central banks have cut benchmark interest rates twice and bank reserves requirement ratios once since November. Now just listen to that language. To bolster the lukewarm real economy. You see, the Chinese haven't learned how to write properly to really keep people in the dark like they do here in the Western world. The real economy is lukewarm. It's worse than lukewarm. Money's flooding out of the place. And you're seeing it buying up a Chinatown or building a Chinatown in a country near you. Here in the States, from Boston to the Waldorf Astoria in New York City, Chinese money, insurance funds flooding in. And the Chinese government now is also behind the push. You're seeing huge outflows of money coming out of China into foreign countries because the bubble over there has actually already burst. It hasn't made the news. So what they're doing, as they're saying, to bolster the lukewarm real economy by the central banks, as they're doing everywhere by cutting interest rates, they're juicing up the equity markets to make it appear as though everything looks okay. China's overbuilt. You look at the Chinese debt. From when they joined the World Trade Organization 2 weeks after 9/11, when most Americans didn't know this was happening, their debt has gone from $2 trillion now to $20 trillion. You're looking at debt to GDP ratios, depending on whose numbers you're looking at about 280%. So they have a huge bubble, and it's already burst. And they're in trouble, and they're going to do everything they can, as the other governments are doing, to keep the Ponzi scheme alive.
Self-driving cars and trucks, how big of an impact will that be?
It's hard to say, and I think it's a dangerous one. You're seeing all of these recalls every year, with exploding airbags or failing ignitions. I mean, can you imagine, vehicles going down the roadways, 60, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour or whatever, out of control? And I think it's a dangerous precedent myself. And I'd rather have the human hand on the wheel than a failure technology. And it's this whole push toward, artificial intelligence. And to me, artificial intelligence is as beneficial as artificial flavors and artificial coloring. There's nothing like the real deal. And I think they're pushing too far in that direction.
Plus, I heard an estimate once that if, say, long-haul trucking and cabs go the way of robots, that's 3.5 million jobs in the U.S., and that would translate in Canada to the loss of about 500,000 jobs.
Well, that's the same that could be said for the Industrial Revolution, which it did. You had machines making garments and doing jobs and building whatever they were building, through technology, through the Industrial Revolution. I think the danger is not in the loss of jobs, but the uncontrollable elements involved in it. Again, look at all the recalls in the auto industry every year. So now imagine magnifying that when you have electronics controlling these vehicles and something goes wrong. You have accidents of proportions that are beyond what anybody could ever imagine. So again, to put, human intelligence to make it come below artificial intelligence, to me, this is geek dreamland, and I'm in favor of the real world. I'll tell you a quick story. I was out the other night, and somebody introduced me to somebody they wanted to write for us, and they were a younger person. I said, we're always looking for the younger people to do more writing for us because they're more in touch with the technological world. I said, I sit in my office and I see people walking by all day, and they're looking down at their hands. I said, look out the window. Again, we're in Colonial Kingston. I said, look at that beautiful building right across the street, the 1777 Senate House, and one beautiful building after another. So if you're walking down the street, not only are you not seeing these beautiful buildings, you're not seeing the trees, you're not seeing the birds, you're not seeing the sky, and you're not seeing other people walk by. And the woman looked at me and said, while you're looking at the ordinary, I'm looking at the world in my hands. And I said, I'd love for you to write about that. They didn't say, what are you, out of your mind? Who are you talking to?
Should marijuana be legalized or decriminalized?
Well, we're in favor of decriminalization, not legalization, because legalization just puts money in the hands of the governments. And, let's say that God planted the seed for the weed. Why put it in the hands of the government and the police? The war on drugs has been a total disaster. The only thing it's done is enriched the security complexes and the private jail systems throughout the country and countries, and it's done nothing to stop the flow of drugs. And a lot of people that shouldn't be behind bars are. So just decriminalize it. Again, you go back to thinking about the way life used to be. There used to be a rite of passage, and particularly you talked before about the older cultures being concerned about the flooding of ancient lands. And when you pass the rite of passage, you are open to new things. The danger, of course, of wild weed is that people that aren't ready for it try it at too young an age when their brain hasn't developed or their minds yet. And so that's the real danger of it as I see it. As a guy growing up and, I've been around. And, you have to be ready for certain things in life. And I think but then again, you look at all of the psychotropic drugs that they're filling kids up with in school, first, second, third grade. They're calling them hyperactive, and they're juicing them up with all kinds of prescription drugs and messing with their minds. So, to me it's a toss-up, but I'm not in favor of legalization. I'm in favor of decriminalization.
Why is it every time you turn around, they're opening up a brand new casino? What kind of a trend is that?
Again, it's another way of governments to make money. And that's, again, when I was growing up, gambling was legal. And then they got, you either had to be in it to win it, and that was lotto. But when they were playing the numbers, it was no good. So when the government gets in the business of opening these joints up to get tax revenues, then it's okay. And that goes back to the marijuana issue again. They're looking at it as a cash cow for tax revenues. That's the only reason they want to legalize it. So the same thing with the casinos. And by the way, it's on a downward trend here. They're opening up places and they're not doing well because the middle class is dying. And very few people now, like the old days, they used to get on these buses and fill the casinos. That's happening less and less. And you're seeing what's going on in Atlantic City. The place is it's a rat hole now. And you're seeing places going bankrupt. So I think the casino trend has peaked, but you're going to see more and more states and cities go for it because they're going to look for more and more revenue.
How do advertisers effectively reach consumers with fewer and fewer watching television or reading newspapers?
Well, you see it more and more online, and it's very tricky because the studies are very, very thin as to the effectiveness of online advertising. So, for example, if you go to Google and you want to watch something, boop, up pops the ad. And do you turn off the sound, or you try not to have it go on at all? So it's very iffy. It's going to be harder and harder. But having said that, it's the mass psychology that really counts. And that could easily be manipulated, and you could do it very, very effectively through entertainment. And that's the avenue for the younger people. And the younger people is the mass advertising market in many ways. So you're going to start seeing it more and more, as it already is, happening in entertainment, in fashion, and in pop culture, rather than through the traditional ways as much as it was before. But the traditional ways will still have the way of having some kind of advantage. But for example, when you turn on the nightly news of any major Western country, or particularly North America, I should say, well, the United States particularly, all you're filled with is drug ads. One drug ad after another. Other countries don't allow it. Bill Clinton made that possible, by the way, in the United States. It was banned before him. They weren't allowed to promote drugs on the air. But when you turn on the TV in the United States with an older demographic, you're flooded with drug ads, and they're very effective because drug sales are going through the roof, whether they're antidepressants or whatever else they could hawk.
Boomers and seniors, are there trends to follow and to make money on?
The boomers are becoming the seniors. I mean, you look at the baby boom generation, they're heading to 1 year away from the first wave of reaching 70 years old. As I like to say, the boomers are going into their old age. Then they're going to be deaf, blind, and out of their mind. And there are, 78 million of them in the United States. The market is enormous for this, and it's not really being tapped into in a very effective way. You're going to start seeing more, something that doesn't exist right now, longevity centers. People that want to live healthy, long lives, that don't want to become inmates in nursing homes. You're going to start seeing more and more in wellness, whole health healing. And you're also going to see more and more in the prescription drug market as well. So the boomer aging market is really the most prolific market as we see it in the Western world, because it's not only the United States that's aging, the entire Western world is aging.
Are millennials causing trends?
They're more followers than trendsetters for a number of reasons. This is the group born roughly between 1980 and 2000. A third of them, you're looking at a lot of these young people, they're forced to live at home, in their parents' basement, or their old room, because they can't find jobs that could support a single lifestyle or a married lifestyle. And they're really not putting down anything unique. You go back to the generations, for the last 100 years, from ragtime to swing, to bebop, to rock and roll, to heavy metal, to disco, one after another. Would like them, hate them, agree with them or disagree with them. There was a sound and a style that identified a generation, and you don't see much of that now. It's they like to call themselves hipsters, but they're not very hip. It's a plaid shirt, a beard, and and when it's cold on, a stocking cap. And what I'm saying is that there's nothing unique about their sound or style, and they're not setting the trends as the baby boomers did in other generations.
Or as we call those hats in Canada, toques.
Yeah. And again, there's not a lot of style in the taste. And what we're seeing is actually, as we're seeing it with the millennials, we're seeing a retrograde trend. They're not going back 70 years, they're going back to the roots. And it's very interesting. You see a number of bands coming out. There's one called Dust Bowl Revival, for example. And they're playing stuff back from the 30s and the early 40s. And they're dressing the part. But not the part to look like that, but to look like themselves with their own style, but not, in terms of elegance and grace. And that's something that's been missing for a while. And when you think of a Renaissance, I mean, what was it? A rebirth, as they said in Florence at the height of the Renaissance. And remember, the Renaissance followed the Black Plague, which some 60% of Europe was decimated. So they realized they weren't doing something right. So they went back to the past to create the future. And they would say, alla Romana e alla Antica, in the manner of the Romans and the ancients, to describe the quality of their work. So we see this retrograde 2.0 as being a very big trend, because the future doesn't look bright in the way it's going, and people are reaching back to the past to find the better elements of it, to retrofit it and bring it forward.
Gerald, how could somebody subscribe to the Trends Journal?
Trendsresearch.com, trendsresearch.com. Of course, we have the Trends Journal, which is the monthly. We have the Trends Journal, rather, is a quarterly. And we have a Trends Monthly. Each weekday night we do Trends in the News. And we have conferences here in Colonial Kingston, New York. And we're having another one coming up on June 6th. How to track trends. We're going to give them the secrets of how we do it, show them how to avoid the dangers, and seek the opportunities ahead by seeing the trends before they come.
Gerald, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Always great being on with you, Jim. Thank you.
My guest has been Gerald Celente, publisher of TrendsJournal.com. That wraps up our show for this week. Thanks to our guests, Ross Clark and Gerald Celente, and thank you for listening. Comments or questions for This Week in Money can be emailed to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. We're back next week with more This Week in Money.
This Week in Money is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.